Photography is not just a job. It's not just something you do. It's something you live and breathe. It's something that's an intrinsic part of who you are. Even if you do decide to take a break and leave your camera at home, you just continue taking mental pictures all the time. It's the end of September 2022 and summer is really coming to an end now. It's been a busy summer, a good summer, but I could really use a break. Every once in a while, I get a little overwhelmed by life. I'm sure that sounds familiar to some of you. It also doesn't help when there's a steady stream of water coming from the sky. I cannot even see out of my window without the drops blocking my vision. I don't necessarily do winter dips, but I certainly benefit from summer highs. And thankfully, summer is still there somewhere in the south of Europe. The first few days are spent basking in the sun to replenish my vitamin D reserves. All I do is stare into the distance and listen to the waves crashing on the beach. After those first couple of days though, my camera is starting to call for attention from the corner of the room, asking if I'll take it out for a walk. Of course I will. I travel to explore more than anything else. I dabbled in proper street photography, you know, the kind that involves photographing people for the first time when I was in London, and I intend to continue that trend on this trip too. Usually, I bring my Fujifilm X100V when I'm traveling. For this trip though, I decided to switch it up and bring the X-Pro3 with the XF35mm f2 instead. I was looking through my online photography archive and noticed that lens created some of my favorite images ever. So I felt like it could be put to great use on this trip. At the same time, I could give street photography a try with this different focal length and see how that's different from the wider lens on the X100V. Our apartment is located a little outside Rhodes town in a place called Kremasti. It appears to be the typical sleepy island village, but looks can be deceiving, and I know the streets don't hide their character as long as you're out there long enough. I dress lightly for the incoming afternoon heat and arm myself with the X-Pro3. I also carried a small XF10 with its 18.5mm lens with me, which I brought in case I need to take the occasional wide-angle shot. Other than that, it's always nice to have a backup camera in case, God forbid, something happens to the main one. I spawn into the sleepiest village I've seen in years. I wonder if there are even local people living here, or if it merely exists to facilitate the many hotels nearby. I look at the watch on my wrist to check the time, but then notice it's a Sunday. Well, that explains the activity at the church I just passed, I think to myself, and the lack of it in any other place. No biggie though. I'm perfectly happy taking people-less street photos as well. A couple hours pass, and after winding down small alleys and abandoned squares, I return to the main road that underwent a resurgence of activity in my absence. I point my camera at the many interesting characters I come across, but have a little more difficulty doing it without hesitation than I did in London. The fact this isn't a big bustling city makes me much more self-aware, and I realize I'm still terrified of people noticing me taking their photo. The chances of that happening when there's a lot of activity on the streets are much smaller than when it's relatively quiet. You simply stand out more with a camera. I pick up the pace, and snapping as I'm moving along works just as well in the tranquility of Greece as it did in London though. The 35mm lens helps a lot too, as I'm physically further away from my subjects, so I don't invade their space as much. I also dared to shoot a couple of photos with the aperture all the way open, which is uncommon for street photography, and I rely on the X-Pro3's autofocus to find the subjects. This works surprisingly well, and I return with a couple of photos I'm very happy with. This repeats for the rest of our days in Greece on our many trips across and around the island. Going on vacation, for me, means leaving everything behind except photography. Because while the act of trying to run a photography-related business can stress me out, roaming around the street with my camera does the exact opposite. Okay, maybe I take my monthly newsletter with me as well, because in the back of my mind, I always think about what would be interesting to share in the email. This story, for example, was previously shared in issue number 14. If you have the time, please give it a read after watching this video. The link is in the description below. Anyway, because of these outings interspersed with monotonous days on the beach, this soon turns out to be the perfect holiday and exactly the break I craved. Meanwhile, back home, the weather has taken a turn for the worse, but I don't mind it at all. I'll happily leave the summer behind now and prepare myself for winter hibernation.